You didn't just walk into Woolworths, you were hit by it. The place announced itself the moment you crossed the threshold: a woody, waxy floor, the warm roast of peanuts, the distant clink of tills. You hadn't bought anything yet, but you knew exactly where you were. This was Woolies, the high street shop that sold everything and, for a generation in Britain during its golden years, helped define growing up. The first thing you noticed, before the sweets, before the toys, before the records, was the floor. In the 1950s and into the 60s, most Woolworth stores had dark-stained wooden floors, not shiny like a department store. These floors were treated with a thick, pungent wax that gave the whole place a distinctive, heavy scent. You could smell it from the doorway. Decades later, catching that same waxy, woody note could flick you straight back to being 10 years old, pocket money in hand. And then the peanuts. Many larger stores had a warm peanut stand near the entrance. Salt and roasting nuts braided with the floor wax to make something unforgettable. It hit you as you stepped in from the cold high street. If you grew up going to Woolworths, you know exactly what I mean. But the smell was only the beginning. The shop floor was nothing like the open aisles of modern supermarkets. It was filled with rectangular island counters, glass-topped, wooden-sided, arranged in rows. Inside each island stood a shop assistant. You didn't pick items off shelves yourself. You pointed, you asked, and the assistant fetched, wrapped and rang up the purchase on a metal cash register. You could hear those tills from across the shop, that clunk and ding that never quite stopped. For many shoppers, that counter service was the heart of Woolworths. Assistants knew the regulars, set things aside, told you when something new had arrived. The islands organized the store into little departments: sweets here, stationery there, haberdashery 2 rows down, sewing supplies in the corner. Shopping wasn't rushed. You could spend an hour wandering between them. Saturdays, when the whole town came through, felt like a ritual. Then, quietly, the shape of shopping began to change. By the late 1950s, Woolworth started switching from counter service to self-service, following the example of American stores. Slowly, the island counters disappeared. The metal registers that had sounded across the shop were moved to tills near the exit. For the first time, you could pick up the items yourself and walk around. If you were a teenager in the late 1950s or early 60s, one counter mattered more than all the rest: the record bar. And at Woolworths, the record bar came with a twist. Between 1954 and 1965, Woolies sold records on its own label, Embassy Records. A regular 45 revolutions per minute single cost around 9 shillings. An Embassy single cost roughly 4 shillings and 6pence. Woolworths hired session singers to record cover versions of the week's biggest hits so shoppers could afford the sound of the moment. The results were mixed. Some covers were surprisingly good. Maureen Evans' cover of Stupid Cupid reportedly outsold the Connie Francis original. Others fell short. You put the needle down at home and realized it wasn't Elvis, it wasn't Cliff. The tune and the words were right, but the voice was wrong. If your auntie had bought one for your birthday thinking she'd got you the real thing, the disappointment stung. Yet when your pocket money only stretched so far, Embassy was all you had: 2 songs for the price of 1 real single. Between 1954 and 1965, Embassy released around 1,200 songs by about 150 different artists. None of them were ever allowed into the official charts. The major labels made sure of that, but in Woolworth stores across Britain they sold in their hundreds of thousands. There is even the legend that George Harrison supposedly told a reporter that even Woolworth's Embassy Records had turned down the Beatles. That says it all, really. Embassy finally ended in January 1965 after its parent label, Oriole, was taken over by CBS Records. By the 1970s, real chart music was on the shelves and the record department had become one of the busiest corners in the store. Customers flipping through singles in plastic sleeves, checking the top 40, hoping their favorite was in stock. Saturday mornings were built around that ritual. But records were only one part of the Saturday trip. Once you'd browsed the music, there was the rest of the list, the reason your mum had actually brought you into town. School supplies from the stationery counter. A new notebook with the blue and white Winfield label. Winfield was Woolworth's own brand, launched in 1963, and its name turned up on half the things in the house. The Ladybird corner was another constant. Woolworth's partnership with the Ladybird children's clothes brand went back to the 1930s. By the 1960s and 70s, almost every child in Britain wore something from that range: dressing gowns, polo neck jumpers, school socks. Fittings were practical affairs. A jumper held against your chest while you eyed the toy aisle. The clothes were built to last. They survived the playground and the washing machine, then got handed down. Tucked away among those rituals was the photo booth, a small curtained box where, for a few coins, you could get passport photos or a strip of 4 silly faces with your mates. The strip emerged slightly damp, smelling of chemicals. You kept every strip, tucking them into wallets and pinning them on bedroom walls as proof you'd been somewhere. And then came Christmas. From the late 1970s, the store was decked in massive foil decorations and fairy lights. The toy section grew into a wonderland of Chad Valley toys, games, and dolls. Starting at Christmas 1975, Woolworths launched its first major TV campaign on ITV. The jingle, "That's the Wonder of Woolworth," written by Rod Allen and performed by the Winfield Brass, was everywhere that Christmas. The 1977 Christmas advert ran for 2 minutes, filling an entire ad break and featuring Georgie Fame, Tony Blackburn, Henry Cooper, and Sir Jimmy Young. 30 products were shown, named, and priced, part advert, part variety show, and families watched it the way they watched Morecambe and Wise. When those adverts came on, you knew Christmas was here. The emotional climax for many children remained the pick and mix. Rows of clear bins, pink shrimp,